What does it mean for an animal to be endangered, and how are they classified? That's what we'll be talking about in this video. A concern of ecologists is the extinction of species in an untimely manner, especially if it is the result of human activities. Now, species have formed and gone extinct throughout the history of life on this planet. But if there are sudden rapid changes to environments and ecosystems, sometimes the rate of extinction occurs faster than the rate of evolution, and we can have mass extinction events. There have been mass extinction events in the past in the history of our planet due to meteorite impact, due to changes in continental structure, and the like. But human-induced mass extinction is something that we would consider morally not to be appropriate, to be morally bad. Here's another example. Even though the scientific method does not make moral judgments, we can say as a society and a culture, we think it's bad for massive numbers of species to be going extinct because of human activities. So as I was saying, species have gone extinct in the past and will go extinct in the future. But human actions can greatly accelerate this process. Biodiversity is the total amount of different species and genetic diversity within an ecosystem. A population is considered to be extinct when there are no reproducing members remaining. If there are no populations of a species present in the wild, a species may be considered extinct in the wild, even if there are surviving members in zoos or aquariums. If there are no surviving members of a species anywhere in the world at all, that species is extinct. The IUCN, or the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, is an international group which is concerned with the preservation of biodiversity. Worldwide, the IUCN produces the Red List of endangered species. Through their work and their research and their assessment of ecosystems, they look to see whether we think a particular species is not really in concern of going extinct, if it is threatened with extinction, or if it has already gone extinct. In fact, there are several categories which a species may be in based on its risk of extinction. And so we're going to talk about several of these categories and highlight a species that falls into these categories. Now, it's important to realize that this union is not just assessing vertebrates, it's not just assessing mammals, but really all forms of life. An example of a species that currently is at least concerned of going extinct, it isn't really at risk of going extinct, would be the plant species of holly. Organisms in this category of being those of least concern, they're evaluated with a lower risk of extinction. Now, should the forests that the hollies live in become eradicated, if they are converted only to human-modified landscapes, it is possible we could lose this type of a species, but currently they aren't at risk of going extinct. Next, we have the near-threatened category. Organisms in this category are species close to the threatened thresholds. Or species that would be threatened without ongoing conservation measures. The emperor penguin is an example of a species which is near threatened. Now, our next three groups, vulnerable, endangered, and critically endangered, are all included with the umbrella group of being threatened with extinction. So what does it mean for a species to be vulnerable? Well, these are organisms which could go extinct if their current trends are not changed. And so the sailfin water lizard, this population of lizards, or this species of lizards, is considered vulnerable to extinction, which is in that threatened status. Endangered is the next category. This is also within that threatened status. These organisms are in danger of going extinct in the near future. And so the salt marsh harvest mouse is an example of a rodent who is endangered of going extinct. Now, critically endangered is also within this group of threatened, and these organisms are very likely to go extinct in the near future, but it might be possible for us to save them with our actions. Extinct in the wild. This classification means that the only known individuals of this species are living in captivity, such as zoos or aquariums or gardens. And so the banded alatoka, this is a fish species which no longer is around in the wild in its native habitat, but some have been collected and are still present in aquarium type settings. And then complete extinction. This means that these organisms have no known remaining individuals on the planet. They are biodiversity that has been lost. And so the Chiricahua harlequin frog, this is an example of a species that had been present, we have records of, but they are now extinct. Now, even if a population is not fully extinct, when the population size falls, there will be a loss in genetic diversity within this population. This loss of genetic diversity results in an increased likelihood of extinction and a potential permanent loss of the species. So even just the genetic variability within a population can be considered biodiversity, and falling population sizes causes a loss of that biodiversity. One of the threats to endangered animals are invasive species. Should we be considered invasive species? That's what we'll talk about in the next video.